Hey guys, sorry about that. It's quite embarrassing. I really messed it up. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm here. I'm just going to try and get Jerome back on. So, Jerome, I imagine you're listening to this now. I need to send you the correct link. Whoops. Um, yeah, this is the Jerome. I've just sent you the link to this current one. Apparently, anyway, according to whatever it says on the screen. Yeah, apologies for this, guys. So, apparently, when you switch from the main user, the initial starter, it means you actually make that the host. So my phone was the host. I obviously closed my phone, like the screen on it. So it meant that this whole thing finished. Me and Jerome were chatting for about 10 minutes, talking about intermittent fasting and eating and rubbish. But
And it was just,
we've primed ourselves now, so it's even better.
and yeah, karma is not without a sense of humor. I think that was some of the finest content that Jonathan or I have ever produced, and unfortunately, it was completely offline. So,
It's so eloquently put. Is beautiful, honestly. Yeah. I don't know, where do we start now? I'm guessing everyone can hear us, and that's something, I guess.
well, I suppose we could start the two questions over and just answer them a bit more succinctly until other questions pop up.
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. All right. Well, looking in the upper left-hand corner, still showing that we're live, so that's
I'm not going to
fantastic.
touch anything.
All right. So, anyways, backstory for the people in the chat. There's three questions that I have for Jonathan initially, five if no further questions pop up. Two have been answered previously, but it was someone that's in the Carnivore Crew Facebook group, and given that that's a group that people have to pay for, those type of questions generally are going to get more preferential treatment. So if you haven't joined the group, it's we're halfway through the first month, but 4 months for 40 pounds is a steal, is an absolute steal. And if you're not in it, we have like a constant kind of chat through Facebook Messenger. It's a great way to interact with others and to get questions answered relatively quickly. So
Yeah, it is solid, honestly. The guys that are watching this in the replay later, Jerome, myself, Sophie, and lots of other people are sort of interacting. You're getting different ideas. So it might be that you don't want to be a top bodybuilder, but you want to maybe lose 10 pounds of fat or something, or gain a bit of muscle, or gain some size to your arms, or whatever it is. This is male or female, by the way. We've got a very even split from male to female, so it's not dominant of males or anything. But yeah, everyone's posting up videos, we're giving each other critiques, and it's a constructive group, so you can actually find help that you need, and it'll be very individualized. It won't be a case of me just sending you a video and say, oh, look at this. No, it'll be a case of me explaining to you, this is what you need to do, this is where you might be going wrong.
yep.
It doesn't take much time from me, and it helps a lot of people out in the meanwhile because it's all shared. So you may think your bicep curl is perfect, but when you see people doing it different ways, you can think, am I second guessing myself here? So you can adjust as time goes on.
All right. So the second attempt at the first question was, Jonathan, for yourself and for clients, do you prefer training fasted or training in the fed state?
I personally train in a fed state, and I second guess myself there, fed state. And this is usually a meal which is something easy on the stomach, so something which isn't too heavy. So it wouldn't be a steak or something, it'd be more eggs and cheese, which is what I usually have for breakfast. It wouldn't be like 10 eggs with loads of cheese, it'd be like 4 or 5 eggs with, maybe 30, 40 grams of cheese. Might have a glass of milk as well, usually 200 ml, so a cup of milk, quite like that. And that seems to hydrate me well without sort of bloating me out too much. I seem to find it quite beneficial. I find that when I train and I'm fed, I'm able to perform a bit better. My theory is that I tend to lose electrolytes a lot when I sleep. Perhaps I have a higher requirement of certain minerals or vitamins. Perhaps I'm not eating enough at the time, my last meal. It could be different things, but it seems to be that my current schedule where I'm eating around 90 minutes pre-workout in terms of eggs and cheese as my pre-workout meal. Having the workout, then maybe eating an hour and a half to 3 hours after that usually. And that suits me just fine. And now Sophie does pretty much the identical thing to me, but she focuses more on Greek yogurt, and she'll be doing Greek yogurt, whey protein with some melted butter, gives us some protein and some fats, digest easily. At least for her, we tolerate dairy quite well, so we don't have this issue that a lot of people seem to have. And yeah, I find that's quite beneficial to me. What about you, Jerome? What do you find is good for you?
My personal preference is to train fasted. My dad is often my training partner, and more often than not, if we're training together with as many force repetitions, static holds, heavy negatives, those more advanced training techniques that we throw in, it's quite common for me to throw up after a workout. So I generally prefer to not have food in my stomach. But with respect to any recommendations for people, a lot of it's going to come down to some trial and error, but ultimately what makes you feel best and what gives you the best performance inside the gym.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately the same. I'm of the same mind. This is why we can't give a direct outline of what is best to someone because it does what they can do. We tried Sophie out, for example, doing the faster workouts. She didn't quite train as well. She seems to match me in terms of performance outcomes, fasted versus fed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we just changed it around and she noticed a benefit. So I'll say that most people that are well fat adapted might be able to do a faster workout better, but not necessarily. It's not necessarily going to be a prerequisite to having a good workout. It's just a trial and error kind of thing, as Jerome rightly said.
All right. The other question we'll address quickly was your thoughts on timing protein and fat around a workout. Is it essential? Is it not too terribly important?
Now, I think it isn't too important in the sense that you don't need to maximize any kind of anabolic window or protein synthesis spike. I think this happens over a 24-hour period over 7 days per week. Now, saying that, I think that you got to find a meal timing that works for you, which improves your performance outcomes. So you might try, myself, I eat 90 minutes before my workout, and that works well for me. Now, I also eat about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours after the workout on average. That also works well for me. Notice I'm not trying to squeeze food in within a 30-minute period post-workout. It is a case of just getting in nourishment when my body demands it. I think that if I was to try and squeeze in multiple feedings around this time, when I've got blood pumping around muscles and away from my digestive system, it's not going to improve my digestive rate, which in turn won't improve my recovery any better. So I think listening to your body is probably going to be a better determinant of what you should be doing in terms of pre and post workout training feedings. I don't think there's a be all and end all answer for this one, so it's something you might consult with myself for or speak to Jerome about and really nail down an answer. And it's something that you'd have to look at your whole program to really get a handle on what would be the best for you as an individual.
Mm-hmm. My personal preference is to get probably at least half of my food intake for the day shortly after a workout. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you need that protein or that food right away to start kind of repairing some of the damage from your workout. But it's just kind of an old school bodybuilding mentality that I'm kind of inculcated with. I like having a big meal after my workout. It feels like a reward to me. It feels kind of primal. So if, on the course of a day, if I might eat between 2 and 3 pounds of beef and maybe half a dozen eggs over the whole day, if I get my workout in at 11, go home, take my dog for a walk, and then have a meal, I'll probably eat, 2 pounds of beef plus the eggs then, and then I'll just have a really light dinner later. That's just my own personal preference, but I haven't noticed any carryover into workout performance. That I'm just a very primal, man eating meat around a campfire away. It's very satisfying to me, so that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, I think you can't go too wrong there. I'm kind of of the same mind. I actually like to, if I'm trying to gain weight, in any capacity, just gain weight to keep weight on, to have more fat at the start of the day, assuming it's easy digesting, then I'll do 2 leaner meals. When I say lean, I don't mean like no fat, I just mean a bit less fat. And then my final meal will be very heavy on fat. So that's when I'll be adding in my carnivore protein butter bites that I make or Sophie makes. And that gives me a bit more energy without slowing me down during the day, without sort of blunting my hunger signals too much. And I've got the overnight period to kind of settle and let it digest.
Nice. And then the last question from that individual, because I see a couple in chat. Thoughts on adaptation by performing workouts or eating the same foods at the same time every day? Basically, is eating the same foods at the same time or getting your workout in at the same time, is that going to be advantageous or disadvantageous in the long run with respect to health and body composition?
That's a good question. So, if we think about people in the military, we know that they have a very regimented routine. Now, if it's not something they're used to and they start in the military, they'll be having breakfast at a certain time, doing the training, any drills, any sort of practice they have to do, then they have lunch, then dinner, and they'll be doing the different things between. Their scheduling is nearly identical most days, so that might work for them. Now, the average person will have things that come across in life which mean that their expenditure, their activities will be different as time goes on. For example, today I haven't actually left my room other than this morning, went for a short walk. So my activity was less, and I could afford to change my meal timing around a little bit depending on when I was hungry. Now, if it's a case of me being at Sophie's house and us doing shopping, us trying to get food in for a certain period of time so we could get on the school run or whatever it was, I might then have to squeeze in a meal a bit earlier, a bit later, depending on what I was doing around that day. Now, this isn't optimal. Ideally, we'll be following our hunger signals, but it's a real world situation where you kind of have to think, okay, my nourishment over the course of a day is going to be more important than trying to match my body's hunger signals exactly. Because it means if I did that, I might have my last meal at 11 p.m. at night, which isn't going to digest well, which means I won't sleep very well, so on and so forth. So it's a lot of things combined together, I think, and that's what's going to have the biggest impact on someone's day-to-day eating scheduling.
I tend to think that, and I've done a lot of bodybuilding contests in the the past, where I would have meals scheduled down to the minute, and I would give myself a 5-minute window that I had to eat this meal. And my own thoughts is I think it might provide a really, really marginal benefit, but big picture isn't anything that's going to contribute, probably even in a noticeable way. When we think about how certain hormones are released sometimes from thinking about food or even anticipating food. But at the same time, most people tend to generally eat a lot of the same foods at roughly the same time of day, and our schedules kind of dictate that based on our work and our professional lives. So it's nothing I would beat myself up over. If you can, cool. If not, much bigger picture is just eating the right foods, and I agree, kind of following your own hunger and satiety signals.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout.
Thanks for addressing those, Jonathan.
My pleasure. I think these were for Jenny, weren't they? Yeah, that's right. I had them written on my notepad, but I wasn't sure when I was going to address them for her, so I thought hopefully you would bring them up today.
Well, I'm trying to, partially when I moderate some of these chats, take note of any questions that don't get answered, because it's easy to just have some fall through the cracks sometimes. And I want people to get the answers that they want.
Yeah, of course, because otherwise they're not going to come back, and
Yeah.
it kind of makes it seem like we're ignoring them, sort of thing, sometimes, maybe. Sophie asked, how would you explain concentric muscular failure? So, for a bit of context, Sophie sent me a video today, which I think was her doing a Smith machine squat. She's trying hard, it was very obvious. However, when she was racking the weight, she kind of got stuck at the bottom, but what I noticed was the first rep was quite similar to the last rep she performed in terms of the concentric, the pressing phase. That kind of tells me that she wasn't quite going to concentric muscular failure. So what she's asking for you, Jerome, perhaps, is how would you define that? What would that look like in a set?
Sure. I would define concentric muscular failure, and this is funny because it's kind of similar to the discussion we were having offline earlier today. If we're being precise with those words, I would define it as the moments where, despite your greatest mental, physical, and even emotional efforts, you are no longer able to move that weight concentrically. As you're fatiguing, nearing the end of your set, it should become progressively harder and harder and harder to move that weight. It should slow down, even if you're trying to lift it as quickly as possible. And when you hit that point and you can no longer lift, if you're holding it statically, still trying to lift for a good 5 to 10 seconds, I would say that is probably concentric muscle failure. But at the same time, if you're training by yourself, it can be really hard to get to that point. In which case, I think a lot of people tend to define concentric failure either when their form starts breaking down and they're unable to maintain perfect form while doing the exercise, or sometimes where just the fatigue is building up to the point where you're unsure if you can complete another repetition, or you're fairly certain that you can't complete another repetition. I wouldn't get too pedantic with the actual wordage. Um, the point is still to generate as much intensity as you safely can. So if you have to call into question the safety of that next repetition, call it failure and then do another set or two if you need to, or whatever's appropriate for your volume. I think is how I would answer that.
Yeah, that's a good response. Safety's the most important thing. It's funny, we talk about all this high intensity training kind of thing, and it can be quite contentious for different people because we all have different ideas and terminologies that we use to describe absolute versus total muscular failure.
Yep.
And Jerome and I had this conversation earlier. We're talking about absolute muscular failure, and basically that means you're being squashed by a car and you're being flattened. If you're talking about absolute muscular failure, because that means nothing is resisting you.
Yep.
You're not resisting it. Sorry. So yeah, it's funny listening to the language we use, but we kind of have to define it some way. So oftentimes I'm finding having to describe concentric muscular failure, static muscular failure, all these sort of things. So
we were both kind of chuckling in agreement that, in a sense, true muscular failure is probably only ever experienced, moments right before death. So, but yeah, don't get too caught up with the terminology, I guess, and that's coming from me and Jonathan knows the conversations we've had where I'm just complaining about how much I hate the usage of certain words and how we need to more properly and precisely define terminology. He gets an earful of that stuff.
Yeah, we had this same. We'll get to the next questions in a bit. We had this same conversation about how we define like energy intake and energy expenditure and how that comes into play. So we're talking about like effective energy, but then we're now thinking, well, is it much good using the words effective energy if we're now looking at the mass balance model as being a better predictive determinant of body mass in terms of like muscle and fat tissue, like grammage on our body, on our frame. So now it's kind of like, do we then use effective energy or do we use the word effective mass balance or something like, I don't know. So now we're a bit stuck. Right. Speaking of asked, what are your thoughts about pull-up efficiencies to build wide back? I was always told that it's the basic exercise for the back. Thanks. I quite like these. Now, people do these sort of exercises because they, depending on what kind of apparatus you're using, they kind of eliminate the issue of having the bar going through your head. So if, for example, you're trying to get a direct vertical pull downwards, you're not going to do it at the bar because your head will get in the way because your head will hit the bar. So you might use an assisted chin-up machine or bars where there's a gap in the middle so your head can fit between it, like your shoulders as well. So I find they're useful for activating, I believe it's the teres major or minor muscles. So like the outside muscles of your lats, well, not really your lats, but kind of above your lats, the outside, so the armpit muscle, so around here. That will add to your width if you're just standing there relaxed kind of thing. But you'll do quite a good job of that as well. So I think it's useful for that kind of application. It will also, if you look at someone doing it with their top off, you'll see their lower traps will work quite a lot, assuming they're doing a direct vertical pull. Now, the problem is people try to use inertia, they'll make it more of a pull down. So the weight will be going this way rather than that way. So there's applications for different kind of motions and directions when you're pulling things. So usually the muscle groups that will be activated as a result of the pulling movement will fall in direct plane with the area that you're pulling it in. So there's limitations to each. So for example, if you're doing a close grip pull down, your elbows won't let you get beyond a certain point. So you might use a wider one, then your elbows can go outside of your hips, outside of your pelvic structure. So that means you can get further down and activate more of the lower muscle fibers. However, just saying that, you could also use a single arm pull down.
Yep.
Yeah, there's different ways you can attack it. I know Zbignev's focused quite a lot at the moment on building a better back. So do you have any sort of tips for him that kind of adds to that question, really?
Yeah, I guess I would caution about going too wide, either on a pull up or an underhand pull down. That's kind of conventional bodybuilding wisdom to build a wide back. You have to get almost an egregiously wide grip on a pull down. You could just as easily hit the lat from a decent angle using a single cable, just pulling down and in, kind of a lat pull in, if you think about it that way. And you can look at the anatomy and physiology of these different muscle groups that you're trying to work. So if you're doing any kind of pull up or even like an underhand pull down, I generally recommend people maintain about a shoulder width grip. And depending on how you're changing your body position and depending on the grip that you're using, you can somewhat shift the overload to different parts of the back. And there's a lot that goes into that. The only other exercise I would think about would be not just for the lats, but also for the traps to help kind of build that shoulder width, is like a wider grip row where you start wide and you pull more in. And that's going to hit the more horizontal fibers of the traps as they function in scapular retraction. But really, if you're just executing quality reps with a couple of different back movements from a couple different angles, you'll probably build about the best back you can build.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be overly complicated. I can say I built most of my back muscle in my earlier years training. My brother and I have quite well developed lat muscles. Maybe genetic, maybe just the way we're built, I don't know. But we always focus on doing like assisted chin-ups and pull-down movements. We'd actually do that primarily over a row. Now we've got an issue where I've got a weaker mid-back, but good lats. So I kind of have to focus more on that now. So the way you'd go about your training is identifying, are you weaker in the lat muscle on the outside or the actual lower trap, mid-trap kind of area, rhomboid area. So I'm weak in the rhomboid sort of area. So I might focus my first movement on doing a row. I'll be focusing on bringing my shoulder blades back and retracting that scapula. Whereas if I was someone that had quite a thick back but not much width, then I'd be doing more of a pull down movement. That's basically it, and it's nothing revolutionary. It's the same thing you'll hear from Ronnie Coleman. Some people even have like a width day and a density day apparently. So you can attack them from different ways. But I know Zbignev's doing from memory I should know, but I think it's push, pull, legs, pull. So he's got two back days and a rotation basically. But it's tricky because you kind of need the feedback. Zbignev's been very good recently. He's been sending me some videos so I can actually see what he's doing. So it might be that it's not the frequency that's not enough, or the volume that's not enough, or the weight or the intensity. It might just be the actual movement itself. He needs to maybe learn the movement correctly. So when I get that feedback, and when I see that, I can give him the feedback and say, it's good, but you're not going all the way down, or whatever it is. So that's where the critical analysis we keep talking about comes in. And I was actually looking at videos today to send to Sophie to kind of answer her question. What is training to failure? And there's not many online. Like I went through about the first 20, 30 videos that I typed in training to muscular failure on YouTube. I couldn't find anything. I saw one video which was a row, but it wasn't quite how I'd kind of see it in my head. So, maybe it's something we can both do, Jerome. You in your studio and me in my home gym or something.
Well, and it's very different if you have an instructor or a training partner versus trying to reach failure on your own. If you're looking at getting close to failure with a training partner, Jay Vincent trained Elliot Hulse from Strength Camp, and he put him through a one set to failure type workout, and Elliot was screaming his head off and being really loud and profane. But he pushed really hard, and I think he still left a decent amount in the tank, but I think it was a higher degree of intensity than you generally see from a lot of people. But yeah, it's everyone talks about training to failure, right? But it's really hard to find examples of people that do it. And even when we film footage of ourselves with other people, oftentimes you watch it in retrospect and you're like, man, I had another repetition or two in the tank, or, I could have held that static hold for at least 10 seconds longer. It's hard to find.
It is tricky as well. And I sent the Carnivore Crew Facebook group chat a video, I think it was about 2-3 days ago, maybe 2 days ago. And it's essentially me doing a leg press. Now, because of the loading of my spine, I had to use a high repetition range so that my back wasn't dealing with as much pressure from a heavier weight. So the problem with going higher in the repetition range is the moment you pause at the top, so if you straighten your legs and you give it a second, you've then reaccumulated that capacity to do more reps.
Yep.
So what I was focusing on was not extending my legs fully, but I was trying to keep it in that active range of motion where I was just going in and out, controlling it top to bottom, until I got to the point where I thought, I can't even hold this rep in a static position now. Like the tension was going across my legs. I could feel like the actual pressure going across my legs. Then that static then just began to crumble, and I could feel like my legs were like folding sort of thing. So I thought, all right, well, rather than drop it, I'm going to try and control it down. But in my individual circumstance, I had to almost drop it just a bit more than I'd like to. Now we're talking about like a fraction of a second quicker than what I'd like, but that might make the difference in your training if you're someone that's quite advanced looking to become elite. It's always doing this, always trying to be better. Sophie and I get a lot of anxiety if we don't train really hard, and it kind of messes us up a bit like the rest of the day.
Well, and the more advanced you get to, you also, not that it's a deal breaker, it makes that big of a deal, but you kind of need to be mindful of the strength curve of the exercise that you're performing versus the resistance curve of the machine that you're using. So most leg presses are designed to have an even resistance curve, but a leg press, as your legs straighten, your moment arm is essentially reducing almost down to zero, where you would have a perfectly straight leg and the entire resistance would be supported through your skeleton. So sometimes you can hit sticking points where you think you're at positive failure, but really, like, you have a lot more concentric effort that you could exert, but you're just having a disconnect between the amount of resistance provided by the machine versus your strength in that particular portion of the movement. So sometimes as the set gets closer to being done, when you feel like you're done and you can't push any further, if you're aware of these things, you can either hold that position for a longer period of time. Otherwise, sometimes that's a cue to lower the repetition and then just push up to that point again. Is it a big deal either way? No, but sometimes and you know this too, like you'll feel sometimes like you're at a concentric failure, but you realize that in a certain sense you're not.
Yeah, it's tricky to feel it because you have these different body signals. So you kind of get more and more focused in the set as time goes on. You feel like lactic acid. It's kind of like a buffer system, but what it actually does is provide you with energy when you're doing this maximal effort output. And I was explaining this to my brother actually through WhatsApp earlier today, and it's funny how little people. I mean, I don't think my brother knows that he's not an exercise physiologist or anything. He's a gym bro like most of us. But then you think a lot of people don't know this, but it's a safety mechanism to make you be able to do that. It's providing an energy source so you can actually do that last, next to nothing portion of a repetition, Rick's got a question. Why is it many people seem to get tired after a steak, but I can eat a 16-ounce steak and go right back to work a few minutes after? I think it's probably adaptive abilities over years of eating lots of meat in one go. I don't know, I don't really like steaks myself much. I mean, I'll like a steak sometimes, but it's not my go-to list. There's been times before when I've bought a nice steak, or Sophie has, for me. Then I've sort of cooked up and thought, I can't eat this. Then the girls have just had it. And, it's like your premium sort of thing that you've bought yourself to enjoy, but then you don't feel like eating it. So, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe it just doesn't hit the spot for me. I do tend to feel sometimes a bit wiped after it. I notice when I eat too much chicken as well, over a period of time, I tend to not feel good after that. So, what about you, Jerome?
I think it's highly individualized and also depends on, not only your normal frequency, but how big that meal is compared to other meals you normally have. There's probably, something about whatever hormone makes you feel full that triggers a cascade of other processes, but just the act of digesting diverts a lot of blood flow from your system. If I have a pound of beef in one sitting or a 16-ounce steak, I feel fine. But if I have 3 pounds of meat in one sitting like I've done before, then I'm usually pretty tired afterwards. But I couldn't speak to the actual specifics of that.
Fair enough, yeah. Brilliant. Please put question at the start of your questions. I nearly missed this one. Getting a push day session late this morning. Finally going to train chest for the first time in 2 months. After tearing something between my chest and shoulder doing chest flies. Any tips? Probably start slow. Don't go
Yep.
too extreme in the range of motion. If you can get any kind of diagnostic testing from someone that is a professional at this sort of thing, it's useful. Some people say they might use tape, for example, if it's a postural thing. If for example, you're getting a pull in a certain muscle group and your shoulders like in a certain way, and they might apply kinesiology tape. I'm not too sure on the efficacy of that. I've never used it myself, but I've seen a lot of people that I respect use it, so it could be useful. Other than that, make sure the warm up is sufficient. So, if for example you're doing, I mean, you're not going to be doing a set to failure if your chest and shoulders are messed up with like a micro tear of some sort.
Yep.
So you might be doing a feeder set. So you'll be doing maybe a 40%. What's it called? What's it called? RM. 40% of your
one
arm.
RM.
1RM. Yeah. So you might be doing that sort of thing. Don't focus on being too explosive. Take your time with it. Probably not go over the top, especially with frequency as well. So don't just assume, you've done a semi sort of workout, you're going to do it again soon. Give it a good amount of time between sessions. I'd err on the side of more caution than less.
Yep.
What do you think, Jerome? You work with people, this sort of thing happens all the time, I
Yeah.
imagine. So
Same. So my first couple of ideas are really watch your changes of direction when you're going from, either the top end of the position of the range of movement back down. Although I suppose unless you're doing a cable fly, there's basically no resistance here. But especially that area in the bottom, it's you don't even need a lot of weight because it's the weight multiplied by the length of the lever that determines how much force is on that area. I would also be somewhat cognizant of exercise selection. Sorry, one last touch on changes of direction. Not that you have to make it egregiously slow, but I usually recommend people, like, the actual speed in the middle of the range of movement doesn't really matter, but you want slow and deliberate changes of direction to produce the amount of force on your joints. Doug McGuff recommends usually 3-second changes of direction from the last little bits of the range of movement to where you're starting to move back in the other direction. That might be a little slow, but just be mindful of it. And then getting back on exercise selection, if you do bench, I don't know if you had any exercises that you had in mind that you were going to do, but I would be more mindful of trying to tuck your elbows down and in a little bit more instead of doing anything like a guillotine bench press or a pec deck or any kind of fly movement. I would probably avoid doing those. If you have some kind of converging chest press, as long as there's humeral adduction, you're still going to be involving the chest. But by having that elbow tucked in, and if your chest press machine has vertical handles instead of horizontal, that's going to put you in a little bit more of an advantageous position. The last thing I would say is also check the seat height and look at the range of movement if you have a chest press. Ideally, you want to start with your arms about the level of your chest, and you want to move slightly upwards. Not every machine is like that, but you can posture yourself in a certain way to hit most of the fibers in a chest, but do so in a way that's very safe. But otherwise, everything Jonathan said too.
that's good to know. Yeah, you brought us a good point there, especially change direction. This is something I'm applying more now because I'm getting more conscious of injury, making things safe for myself. So when I am doing any pressing movement, I've got maybe 1 or 2 videos up on this sort of thing, but from say here to here, it might be, I don't know, 2 seconds, but that last portion, which is maybe a quarter of the rep, might also be 2 seconds.
Yep.
Don't, like Jerome said, don't get caught up in the timings. Just make sure you're really focusing on, like, the change of direction is really controlled, slow, to the point that you're consciously doing it. You're not using any momentum.
Yep.
What's going on in the chat? Ooh. Yeah, so Jay, I know Jerome's looking at doing maybe some videos. It might be in a Carnivore Crew group video library, but that's a paid monthly subscription. It's on Facebook and it's £10 per month. That'd be useful if you want to see that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's good. I hadn't considered that, but I'll start doing that. So I'm getting ready for a contest now, and maybe it's just my inner bodybuilder. You usually don't want to go shirtless or mostly shirtless on camera until you have a certain look. And again, we're always our own biggest critics. but I put one video on the group of me doing a pec deck, and I was critical of my own shortcomings that I thought I had in that video. But I think the relative intensity of that was higher than most people generally see. And then I have a client that's been open to the idea of me recording either a couple of how I train people and how hard I push the people I have, or possibly even recording a whole workout. But not to plug the group too hard, but I think that's a good idea. And I think when I premiere those videos, I'm going to put them in the group first, and then maybe a week later, put them on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, we can make it so we can post it onto YouTube, but people with a specific link are the only ones that can access it.
Oh, nice.
So that's also another option. So then all you got to do is just make it public after a period of a week or so. Speaking of asked, why the burn the quadriceps in legs is so difficult to withstand in comparison to other muscles? Any ideas? Generally speaking, the legs are quite far away from you, depending on what you're doing. They require a lot of oxygen uptake to deliver any work, so it's a very, very taxing thing to do. We know, for example, if you're doing a 10 rep squat, it's going to wipe you out more than a 10 rep bicep curl. That is a good question. I mean, my brain's a bit dead at the moment. What do you think, Jerome?
Yeah, I would say first, because they're a relatively large muscle group in terms of volume, and secondly, because they just have more sensory nerves than most likely other body parts in the lower body. And I've talked before, and I did a Facebook post on my business page talking about how in a leg press or a squat, the glutes are actually the prime mover. When you look at the direction that the leg is moving against the resistance, the glutes are the primary mover and the quadriceps are a secondary mover. But when we do a leg press or we do a squat, we might feel a little bit, but we don't feel the same degree of burning in our backside and in our hamstrings that we do in our quads. And it doesn't mean that the quads are the prime mover or that the quads are getting the majority of the overload. It's not actually the case. It's just for whatever reason, we have more sensory nerves there compared to other body parts. But I'm with you. Like a set of really hard leg extensions is brutal, and squats or a set of 20 squats or 25 squats, any kind of high intensity lower body movement is very demanding and very mentally challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the argument for muscle fiber composition, but depending on what area of the quadricep you're looking at, it's going to have differential amounts between fast and slow twitch muscle fibers anyway. So it's anyone's guess really. But like Jerome said, it's a relatively big muscle group, lots of nerves, and it's tiring as hell.
Yep. So. Yeah, I don't like leg day.
Yeah, we've got Carnivore Kip in the chat. He started up his YouTube channel recently, and he's I believe an American gentleman that's lost a ton of weight
awesome.
over the last few months. He's very, very newcomer to the carnivore community. He's looking to sort of lose more weight, but obviously he doesn't want to put extra pressure for his knees or weaken himself, sort of thing. So he's using a lower or a less strenuous exercise in terms of on his joints, which makes sense.
Yep.
So yeah, do you have any advice for him at all? As a man that's quite heavy, looking to lose some weight, but not also looking to sort of wreck his knees and things.
Sure. I guess before anything physiologically, make sure you have a good support group around you. Your partner, your family, friends, people you meet online. There's going to be times, holidays, social gatherings where it's really challenging and it can be really difficult. And Jonathan and I can talk biomechanics or physiology all day, but sometimes having a good crew of people that really care about you and want to support you in what you're doing is far more important than that. And one thing I've been really grateful for is the carnivore community is largely very understanding and very compassionate, and we all just want to help each other succeed. So I would say that's number one. I'm a big fan of low impact activities. So I think if you want to get a bike, I think that's a much better decision than doing anything that's going to have, repeated impact like walking or jogging or running would be. And diet, sticking to a diet, really learning how to listen to your body, and learning how to deal with cravings and hunger. If you can tame cravings and hunger, that's probably 90% of the work, and that's going to get you most of the way there. What about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, you brought some really good points that I wouldn't even thought to bring it up. Ultimately, if you've got a massive weight loss journey, if the people around you aren't supportive of you, it's going to make it so much harder. So I know Sophie, she's lost something like, in the last, 3 years or so, she's lost about 50 kilos.
Yeah.
And she's a 5'4", 5'5" lady. It's a lot of weight. She's lost about half her body weight. And she's done that, partly through her own doing, in terms of doing a different diet before. She's now doing the carnivore diet, which has made it so much easier. She had me as a supportive partner, as a body composition coach. I'm able to sort of give her advice and help her and talk about the mindset thing. Because, like Jerome, I've been up and down in body weight, to the body fat levels. I've bulked, I've cut, I've done it over and over again. I know what it feels like to be without food and feel a bit hungry. To have a supportive group. And other than that, one little side note, one bonus tip, which I'll give you for free, is if possible, go outside and do your exercise on the bike outside. So if it is possible for you where you live, drag your exercise bike outside on a summer's day, or just any summer's day, or sunny day, sorry, and do it outside. It's much better for your brain. You'll feel better, fresh air. If anyone's that I'm coaching does activity, providing it's possible for them and safe for them, I like them to do it outside. If it's going to be any what I call daily exercise, that means like something you do, like walking the dog. If you can go swimming outside somewhere, go to the sea, walk along the beach. All those sort of things I think are better than running on a treadmill in bright light, staring down, you're watching TV, watching the news. I don't think that's good for the brain.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to reach out. There's a number of people in the carnivore community that have lost a pile of weight. Like you mentioned, Sophie's lost 50 kilograms. I've lost 100 pounds. Kelly Hogan's lost 110 pounds. Brett Lloyd has lost a bunch. And you would be surprised how many people, if you just send them a message on Facebook or Instagram, will get back to you and just are happy to chat. This is a very warm and welcoming group of people. And like I said, we're all here to support you. And, we're here for you.
Yeah, and because I feel for this guy, because I know he's really actively trying to better himself. I really support anyone that's trying to go from point A to point B with their body composition. I will say, kind of ignore all the chatter. You'll post up a video, for example, Kip, and it'll be you cooking your food in a certain way, or doing this, that, the other, adding spices, adding salt. You get people say, "Oh, don't do this, add this, take this away." All these other little add-on things, which you don't need to worry about. You just need to focus on what Jerome just said, which is getting the social group right, sticking to the diet, doing some activity that feels good for you, and just staying on track. All this other nonsense is that extra 1% that probably won't do anything that you'll notice. Got a question from Ben Sherman. First time doing one set to failure for legs. Oh my god. I'm laughing because I imagine this is painful already. After the set, my legs buckled and I couldn't walk for a minute. Is this normal? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So after a set, if you're doing a set, I'll probably say any leg movement, whether it be quad, hamstring, calf, or glute dominant. If you're standing up and you're not sort of shaking everywhere, like tremoring, your whole body's like, what's just happened? You probably haven't done it quite to failure. So this is normal.
Yep.
All I'd say is just don't get up immediately. Give it a minute.
Yep. Some of that, if you have more fast twitch muscle fibers in your legs, it's going to be a little bit harder compared to if you have a little bit more slow twitch. Some of that you can't really tell unless you get like muscle fiber typing done, but you can kind of get a feel for it if you train long enough. Whoop, I think my camera just clicked off. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. That's important.
Okay, I'll mess with the camera in a second after I answer this. What I tell people when I have them in studio is right after they finish a hard leg exercise, I say, don't trust your legs. Do not trust your legs. And I will help them hobble to the next exercise if I need to. But yes, good job. Get your gold star for the day if you're struggling to walk.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, you'll notice this and you'll feel it, honestly. You'll feel it and it'll be tough tomorrow probably. So just be careful. Jay said, Facebook crew, here I come then. Yeah, honestly, it's a very good value proposition. There's about 18 to 20 people in the group. So it's not densely populated to the point that you'll get lost or things will be unheard. There's loads of people active throughout different time zones. We've got Australians, Europeans, myself from the UK, England technically, Jerome, US, I think we've
Yep.
got 1 or 2 Canadians as well. France,
You've got
all over the shop.
3 people just in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that is strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I don't know how the hell that happened.
Yeah, still able to join, Jay, and it's honestly good value. And one point I want to make is Sophie posted about the group, the Carnivore Crew group, on one of the Facebook groups, and someone said, "What do I get out of this that I'm not already getting for the current group?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to take myself off from spending like countless hours on these individual groups and help people that want to apply this knowledge. It's all good me posting on a group, but if that group is not receptive to what I've got to say, they don't buy into me as an individual, or Jerome or Sophie or any other group members that are, very top notch in terms of their expertise. It doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, I provide different pieces of advice here and there most days on different groups, and I might get a like, but it doesn't seem to impact many people. Whereas when people, it gives you that accountability. So if okay, I'm paying these people £10 per month for this service, this group, I'm going to make sure that I'm applying the knowledge that they're giving me. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to ask them why it's not working. So is it that the knowledge is incorrect, or is it that application knowledge is wrong? Then we can troubleshoot from there. So it gives you more opportunities to find answers that you might need and overcome plateaus, because lots of people can get into relatively good shape. It's getting to the next level, which a lot of us find hard. When I say good shape, I mean contextually. Like, my idea of good shape is being in contest shape on stage. Sophie's good shape might be, getting a smaller waist. So it's very individualized.
Yeah, and I would say too. I mean, for a month, and like I don't make anything from the groups. I don't have anything to gain by saying this. For the cost of 1 month, it's like 2 cups of coffee. If you go to Starbucks or if you go to somewhere else, it's relatively inexpensive. And one thing I would like to see more people in the group doing that I would be taking advantage of is I would be putting training footage on there all the time. And there's been a couple people who have done that. And Jonathan is very quick to offer tips, but sometimes just a small correction in how you're performing an exercise can not only make it safer, but significantly more productive. And it's very easy for me or for Jonathan or for some of the other people in the group to look at that training footage and either make a small correction, or sometimes, like, when I see stuff in that group, like, I know I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding contest now, but like, that motivates the hell out of me when just average people that are, working their normal jobs to put food on the table for their families are putting their training footage in there and saying, "Hey guys, can you just let me know what you think?" There's a lot of value there. And when I think about all the time that I wasted and all the hundreds of dollars a month I've spent on supplements, like, you're going to get your money back easily, sometimes with just one question. And you've got, 4 months to work with this group of individuals that are all working together to support each other. So really, I mean, the worst thing that Jonathan or I or anybody else in the group would say is if you asked for too much and we basically said, "Sorry, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this group," and we would push you towards a consultation. But I haven't seen anyone even come close to that. So I can't highly recommend it enough. And it motivates and inspires the hell out of me to see a lot of the stuff that people have posted in there so far.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I was thinking the same actually when I saw Steph post her arse to grass squats. Like, that takes work. Like, getting that far down in the squat position and coming back up, then just keep doing it until it's really hurting. That motivates me a lot. Question: any tips for things to do in the gym on rest days?
I wasn't sure if you're going to read that or if you're just thinking that's. I suppose in a legalistic sense, it's almost a contradiction in terms, right? I'll finish reading it. I only train 1 to 3 times per week per mentor advice, but I just get so bored. I want to become more athletic without directly training a muscle group. There's maybe some validity to some active recovery, some very low intensity, more moderate duration, quote unquote, cardio. Maybe it's just me. I would rather invest that time going for a walk outside or reading a book or chasing some other passion that you have. You will build that athleticism as you get stronger, and if you have any specific activity that you want to start conditioning that neuromuscular pathway. But if you are looking for other things to do outside the gym, man, I could give you a book list recommendation a mile long. Um, Life is so short and so incredibly beautiful, and there's so many things to see and do and experience. I tend to take the approach that I want to spend the least amount of time in the gym possible so that I can go and do other things that I love doing with my life. Um, but if you want to go, then yeah, I would probably do very low intensity cardio while you're listening to a podcast. Try and do something to feed your brain good material. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, it kind of comes down to I believe the first interview I did with Bart Kay on my channel. So it's something like diet and exercise with Professor Bart Kay or something like that. If you look on my channel, we talk about training specificity. So if you're trying to be athletic, you have to train in a way that matches what that endeavor is, ideally. Yep. And other than that, I mean, exercise that is outside is going to be better, better for your brain, better for your mental health overall. And one thing as well is Dorian Yates. He used to train, I believe, 3 or 4 times per week, something like that, and he'd do a high intensity training sort of split. And he would make a point that when he was preparing for his contest, if he was doing cardio, it would be on his off days. So he wouldn't be trying to kind of like double load up all his exercise volume on one day. He'd use that actual cardio, so like just treading along slowly on the elliptical trainer, as a way to modulate inflammation, work his heart a little bit, become a bit fitter, get his mind right. So he might be doing that whilst listening to music, thinking about his posing routine, whatever he happened to be doing, whatever he had to be learning at the time. So yeah, like Jerome said, use your time wisely. Find things that you enjoy. And I mean, I used to train something like 20 hours per week, including all my athletic work back in the day. 20 hours of exercise a week is rough. Yeah. I did enjoy it at the time, but I'm looking back and thinking I wasn't making much progress. So I'd look at doing any kind of light exercise on the rest days if you're going to do anything. And even then, if you do some active recovery, that might be stretching as well, might be good. Mobility work on making yourself more formidable. So if, for example, you've got shoulder issues, chest issues, whatever joint issue you have, read a book on that. It might be useful.
And Zach, I want to apologize too. I didn't at all hope I didn't come across condescending. That wasn't my intent. If there's anything specifically you want to do athletically, those rest days can be great for working on that particular specific skill. And then from everything I've read with skill specificity and motor learning is practice that skill until you start seeing diminishing returns. So if you play basketball, you want to be better at basketball, shoot free throws on, until you start missing a bunch in a row. After maybe 20, 30 minutes of shooting free throws. And then you can do stuff like that to improve that skill specificity on your off days quite easily. But the second you start seeing diminishing returns, just cut it off. So again, I apologize if I came across as condescending. I wasn't trying to tell you, like, don't go to the gym. It's your life. You're in charge. You make the rules. You determine what you do with your time. So I apologize if I came across the wrong way.
I wouldn't have noticed anyway, Jerome. I'd have just ignored you if I didn't like what you're saying.
That's fair.
But fair enough. Respect to you for saying that, because we don't want to sound condescending at all here with our advice. We're just 2 guys that are trying to help people out, basically. Susie asked, question: any tips on post-exercise recovery? I was hoping with Carnivore that my recovery time would be reduced. I'm still quite sore after high-intensity interval training class, sprint training, etc. I'll be looking at your overall training volume. So, Susie, for example, if you're doing, 3 HIIT sessions per week, is it that you're doing so much but you're underfeeding yourself? Is it that your sleep isn't well managed? Is that you're staring at a screen at night? Loads of things we could go into. This sort of thing would be a consultation question to really nail down properly and give you a proper, solid answer. But saying that, like I said, there's things you can look at. If, for example, you're doing a HIIT class, and we know these sort of things will say, all right, you're signing up to Monday, Wednesday, Friday HIIT classes, and they're going to be 30 minutes each. It might be that at that moment in time, that is too much for you. That's too much activity. Maybe you need a 25-minute class. I know you probably can't scale it back in that sort of direction, but maybe you don't spend 10 minutes warming up and 10 minutes cooling down. Maybe you get rid of the extra stuff, the fluff on each side of your training sort of phase. So yeah, I mean, it could just be you're doing too much, maybe under recovering in terms of not managing your time well outside of the gym or your recovery well. Under feeding maybe as well. Maybe you're just trying too hard, you're being too overzealous, and lots to look at. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah. And speaking more broadly, you can only do so much. And a part of recovery ability is going to be genetically mediated. So you can optimize your recovery in terms of fine tuning your diet, in terms of maybe doing some kind of active recovery, really focusing on sleep, drinking enough fluids, stuff like that. Those things that really should get addressed more in a consultation. But ultimately, um, sometimes some people just can't recover from a certain amount of volume or as high of a frequency as other people can. A lot of people that skew more towards the genetic bell curve of expression that are endowed with those abilities can tolerate a significant amount of exercise daily or every other day. But I have clients, and I've had clients in the past that work out once every 10 to 14 days, because if I give them more volume of exercise or more frequently than that, then they're unable to recover and continue making progress. Now, granted, that is the opposite side of the bell curve of expression. These people are bereft of the gifts necessary to recover quickly. But it's something that you really have to go based on performance, and really look at diet and sleep and some of these other factors. So just, I guess, be aware that that's a possibility too.
Yeah, good advice. Stephen or Stefan? Stephen? I'm going to
I'm gonna
guess
say
Stephen.
Stephen.
Yeah. Stephen Williams asked, I may have missed you answering this before, but is 1 to 3 times per week training actually ideal? DC training is an example of 3 times per week training working for muscle growth.
Yep.
So that's dog crap training, using intensifiers, so Widowmaker sets for legs. Trying to remember now, like 1 or 2 warm ups, 1 heavy set, so kind of like primer sets or feeder sets kind of thing. I think the ideal amount. I mean, Jerome kind of answered this in the last one. He kind of said he has some clients that are doing 1 session every 14 days. And I've spoken to some people like Declan, who visits my channel and speaks to Jerome quite frequently.
Yep.
I think. I think he's doing 1 session every 8-9 days, something like that. Maybe 2 every 8-9 days. So he might be on that end. Myself, I'd like to train about 4 times per week. I'm thinking now, if I'm taking every set to total failure, as in the eccentric failure is like there, it might be 3 times per week for me. I think it scales up or down based on the intensity. If you're finding 3 times per week very intense, but you're getting stronger, but you're feeling good, your appetite's not all messed up, you're sleeping fine, you're not feeling stressed out, you're not feeling like horrible and miserable sort of thing because you're training too much, then you can maintain that just fine. If you get to a point where you go to the gym, your logbook starts to go downhill, I imagine you're recording your weights if you're using dog crap training, because that's one of the main principles of it. Yeah, I think the right amount of training is the right amount that you can recover from and adapt from, depending on your goals. So if you're trying to be stronger, I mean, you mentioned this for muscle growth, so you probably look at somewhere between like 1 session per 14 days up to maybe 4 per week. So it's like Jerome just said, it's quite an individual sort of question to really cover. But there's some ideas, I think. What do you think, Jerome?
Yep. And I hope you write everything down. And I write everything down for my clients. Jonathan puts his workouts in the Carnivore Crew Facebook group. It's going to be mediated by performance. And you could start 3 times a week, and that's a good starting point for a lot of people. But if you notice that you're hitting a plateau, then your volume and your frequency and your diet are 3 separate but 3 very important knobs that all can kind of be fine-tuned, and you can manipulate those and see how your body responds. If you want to get granular, I put a Facebook post up recently showing Otto and Carpinelli did a meta-analysis analyzing the American College of Sports Medicine's recommendations for exercise, and based on over 140 studies, said there's no big difference between training 1 to 3 times a week. James Fisher, James Steele similarly did a meta-analysis showing there's no difference between training 1 to 3 times a week. That's a very specific caveat, though. That's with respect to muscular hypertrophy. If you're doing anything skill oriented, you essentially want to practice that skill as much as you can. to the point where your performance starts suffering. Um, so yeah, if you're trying to build muscle, it's going to be so genetically mediated. And I did a video showing pictures of my weight loss, showing pictures of a client that I had, Matt, that lost 50 pounds in 6 months. He literally doubled to tripled his strength on every single lift. And when we started together, he was exercising 3 times a week, 10 to 12 sets of workout. And then it wasn't until I got him down to 6 total sets, once every 10 to 14 days, that he had his best results. Um, and his bench press went from 135 to 315, squats from 135 to 305, and deadlift from 185 to 405 while losing 50 pounds. But I really had to dial down that frequency as he got stronger. So I apologize. That's a bit of a rant on what should have been a very short answer.
No, it's good to apply context, I think, and give examples. I'll give my examples as well while we're at it. Just so you guys know, probably going to finish up in about 5 to 10 more minutes, but I'll just briefly cover this. So years ago, now this is like 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago, I wanted to get better at bench press. I don't know why, because I don't like bench press. I don't find it enjoyable at all. The point is, basically, over a span of a month, what I did was I went from training chest twice per week to just doing bench press as my only lift once per week. In that time, my bench press strength increased week by week by week, and quite a good amount as well. So I think I started at about, say, 90 kilos, maybe for 10. Then I got to 95 for 10, 100 for 10. It went up about 5 kilos each time. It's about 10, 12, well, about 12 pounds or something, or 11 pounds. Yes, 11 pounds. And that's from week 1 to week 4. So I gained like 45 pounds in my bench press. The thing is, when you go too far in one direction with that, so if you think, I'm kind of giving this on the flip side sort of thing. So when you go too far on the edge of not doing enough, you're not always going to get the extra 11 pounds. So you get to a point where your peak strength is kind of maximized. So it might be that after week 8, I might not have got 11 pounds every week. It might have been 2 pounds every week. At that point, you might say, well, do I need to learn the movement better? Do I need to do it slightly more frequently again? There's different things you can try and do. I was saying that I did feel my recovery was good and did feel good. When I was pressing, I enjoyed it, which is weird because I don't like bench press. But yeah, that's my own little story based on bench press and chasing strength with the one lift I ever bothered to try and chase.
And the more technical the skill, the more specific those strength gains are going to be for that movement. So if you did bench press like that for 12 weeks and then didn't touch the standard flat bench press again for 4 months, even if you were doing other chest exercises and continuing to build strength through a variety of pressing movements, you would probably go back to the bench and your bench press might be down 30 or 40 pounds from where it previously was. And it's not that you lost muscle or necessarily lost strength. You just kind of lost that degree of neuromuscular conditioning that you had for that particular movement.
That's a good shot. Yes.
I appreciate that, Zach. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, very good. My pleasure, Susie. Yeah, it looks like we've got some more material to cover for our secret project.
Yeah.
New questions come up. So I was thinking that as we're going along, Jerome, the questions that come up about, I'm trying to think which one it was. There's so many different rabbit holes we can go down. Like the training on off days sort of thing, because that's something that people want to do.
Yeah.
It's all good us giving an outline, but saying just do this. What people want to know what they can do other than that, because it's always a case of doing more. So we always dissect it that way as well.
And those questions can be particularly difficult with how individual they are. What works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. You had that question on the Carnivore coaching corner yesterday, talking about could someone exercise every single day like that, and you can't give a straight answer to that. You can offer your advice, your thoughts, why it may or may not be a good idea, how they might go about doing it, but ultimately some of those things will come down to sometimes you just have to do an N=1 experiment and see how it goes. But yeah, this definitely got my wheels turning. I'll leave it up to you whenever you want to reveal what you and I are going to be working on, but maybe that's best saved for a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, down the road, I think.
It was your brainchild though, so you're under no obligation to.
Partly, yeah. I mean, the bigger project, the one that I initially kind of brought up, that's something that now I'm thinking will be better done after we do ours.
Yep.
It kind of makes sense that way, because then we can kind of find out what happens as a result of that, then
Yep.
think, okay, what do people want to know? Because it's got to be definitive. It's got to be the best thing going. At least what I'm trying to do anyway. Because I hate reading books, and I've read different books about this sort of thing before, and I've got a few books over there, and I think they've not really answered many questions here. It's not any new information to me. It's just they've worded it in a way and put some pictures up. It needs to be new.
Yeah. Agreed.
Ah, yes. All right, we're going to head off now, guys, because there seems to be no questions in the chat. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been great to have Jerome on, so thank you very much again for coming on and providing me with your brilliant insights, and giving Sophie a break as well.
You're being far too charitable. Thank you for having me on. I'm always happy to be here.